Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Care Right podcast about family caregiving and resources available to families and professionals all across the country. My name is Annalee Kruger. I'm the owner and president of Care Rights Incorporated. We are a virtual family caregiver, senior care, dementia, and end of life consultancy serving families across the globe in understanding aging, family caregiver burnout, dementia progression, senior care options, as well as end of life grief and moving beyond being a caregiver. As you know, I always find really super cool people who are doing really cool things. And today is no different. Today, my guest is Ariel, and I will have you introduce yourself and your firm and what you bring to the table for families in New York. Go ahead, the stage is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ariel Rosenzveig. I'm with Eli J. Rosenzveig and Associates. I'm a managing partner of the firm. We practice in areas of trust and estates, elder law, as well as tax and employment law and mediation. And we're based in Elmsford, New York, right outside White Plains. We service New York and New Jersey, and we do a lot of work in the elder care space in terms of advanced planning, crisis planning, Medicaid planning, asset protection planning, estate planning, guardianship when relevant, some special needs work. Basically anything in the estate planning and elder care and special needs space.
Great, great. Why is it important for people to think about putting a legal plan in order, like an estate plan in order? What are mistakes people make, or what happens when people don't have a legal plan?
It's a very important question, and a lot of people have the assumption, one, my husband, my wife is just going to get everything. That's just what I would want, and everyone views it that way, that, husbands and wives are inseparable. That's not always the case. It may be hopefully in yours. It's not always the case. And it's really important that you put a plan in place. But more importantly, people feel, well, my kids will deal with it, or I don't have enough money to have to worry about it. These are all these are all fallacies. You do have to worry about it. Number one, you want to lay out the plan for your kids, for your family members, so that they're not left trying to pick up pieces, which are going to often be dealt with in a very emotionally charged moment with family members who all have different ideas as to what to do and could create friction. And for most people, they say if you ask them what their legacy is and they're truthful about it, it's not the money, it's their family. And if you create friction in those moments, they're often irreparable. So it's really important to lay it out for them so that you minimize the friction. It still does exist and we deal with it all the time, but you greatly minimize the opportunity. The other thing is that people often forget that, well, there's 100% chance that they're going to die
I,
someday.
yep,
We all are. But there's a 75% chance that they're going to need care someday.
right.
And people totally don't realize that that's even something to be concerned about. 50% of Americans do some sort of estate planning. Almost 0% of Americans do any sort of elder care planning, and
Right.
there's almost a high likelihood that you're going to need that. So it's really, really important you put things in place. I always tell people, if you're going to do something first, number one, the earlier the better.
Yep.
People should be doing planning when they're young with small children, but all the more so as they're getting older, before they need care, not in a crisis. And number two, if you're gonna pick your most important things to tackle first, it's power of attorney and healthcare proxy. No matter what state you live in, and we practice in New York and New Jersey, we have an attorney on our staff who practices in Connecticut and another one in Massachusetts as well. But no matter what state you live in across the country, the authority that your agent, your power of attorney, who deals with your finances, your healthcare proxy, who deals with your health needs, end of life decisions, the amount of power that they have is completely tied into the authority you give them. It's not just a carte blanche authority that they could do whatever they want. Very often we have people come to us where they did a power of attorney when they sold their home. And that allows you to buy and sell real estate. It doesn't allow you to do trust planning. It doesn't allow you to do gifting. It doesn't allow you to do a lot of the things that are necessary in an elder care space. And then you end up in guardianship court if a person doesn't have a capacity to do it right. So the first thing I tell people is sit down, let's look at your whole situation and figure out a game plan, whether it's all immediate or it's all over a period of several months, whatever it is to put a plan in place.
Ariel, can you take a minute because I talk about guardianship and conservatorship too when people don't when they fail to plan and then they end up with this very expensive emergency guardianship conservatorship arrangement because they didn't put any planning in place and now they lost capacity, they fell, they hit their head on the kitchen sink and now they have a brain bleed or dementia progressed faster than what families thought that it would. But we kind of breeze over like guardianship. It's a terrible process. Can you like it can be an embarrassing process. You have to go to
Yes.
court and it's expensive. Can you talk about like the ickiness? Like what is guardianship really like, the whole process for a family?
Absolutely. So, firstly, the purpose of guardianship is for somebody, hopefully a family member, to be authorized by the court to act in the stead of someone who is incapacitated, whether it's as guardian of the person, which is health related issues typically, or whether it's in relation to their finances, guardian of the property. And usually we do both. If we're getting a guardianship and they didn't have any planning in place before, and it's usually both. So guardianship is commenced in two different scenarios. One where you don't have documents in place. The second is the more difficult situation is where there are documents in place, but you're trying to get your mother to stop driving
Mhm.
and she refuses. And you can ultimately, what a power of attorney and healthcare proxy, you are the agent of the principal. If the principal objects to what you're doing as healthcare proxy, or they remove you as power of attorney because they're like, I don't want my son, I don't want my daughter dealing with my finances, you then have to, if you want to force it, you also have to go to guardianship court. But usually the cases of guardianship are where you need to go to court to get authority that no one ever gave you,
Right.
where there's no power of attorney in place, or if there was one where it wasn't robust enough to deal with elder care and estate planning needs or tax needs or whatever else the purpose is. And then you go to court where essentially you're petitioning the court to give you the authority. Now, hopefully at the end of that process, the court gives you that authority, but there's various variables that come into play during that process. One, there could be a family member who disagrees.
Hmm.
That complicates things, a contested guardianship.
Yep.
The other issue is that, and this is the more emotional, well, not necessarily more emotionally painful. Sometimes that is very emotionally painful, but you're essentially getting an entire courtroom of people to attest to the incapacity of your loved one who is
Yep.
sitting right
Right
there.
there. Yep.
Sometimes they're brought into court, sometimes they're brought in on Zoom. The courts aren't looking to create a very upsetting situation, but it often is a very upsetting situation where
Sure.
essentially you have a whole group of people sitting around deciding how smart you are.
That's right.
And that is not the situation that most people want to put themselves in or put their loved one in. And often, especially with people who have more advanced dementia, you don't really know what they know and what they don't know. And which makes it all the more painful is that you're the child, you're trying to do the right thing, and you don't know what they're thinking is like, whether they know that everybody's talking about them, whether they don't know that everybody's talking about them, you really don't know. And then at the end of the day, even if you get guardianship, now you have a court or a judge that basically has final say on everything. Anything you want to do, any planning you want to do, you need a new order from the judge, where now you have a court and an expense
Yep.
involved in the ongoing life of your parent. Why? Because the whole job of the court is to step into the role of the loved one,
Yep.
and and they need to make sure that everything's going right. So just because you're the husband, just because you're the wife, just because you're the kid does not mean that the court automatically assumes that everything you're doing is in the best interest of what they call their ward, the alleged incapacitated person.
Right. And there's a lot of paperwork. You got to file reports. You can't just move say you can't just move your loved one to a different county or to a different facility or out of state. Like every decision has to be approved by the
Yeah,
court. Like
absolutely. Everything.
you don't have the freedom to be like, oh, well, dad didn't like this facility, so we're going to move him across you know, every single thing has to be back to court, which is costing money and time. I mean, it's guardianship is not the avenue that you want to go in. That is the avenue in my experience that people find themselves in because they didn't do pre-planning or because they were ignorant and denial in that, okay, well, I'm never going to get old, I'm never going to die, I'm never going to lose capacity. And guess what? Happens to millions of people with major strokes or dementia progression or Parkinson's with dementia. And here we are in guardianship court, and it's expensive, it's time consuming, and you have to file reports every time you turn around. There's a report to file, and it's expensive. So I just wanted to bring home the point, like that's not what you want to end up in. Like, so anybody listening to this podcast, one takeaway should be, okay, where am I at with my own legal documents? Do I have my power of attorney in place? Have I communicated the power of attorney to my decision maker that I appointed? Do they have a copy of it? Is the person that I appointed 5 years ago still equipped to be my power of attorney, or do I still have a relationship with them? Like those are the mistakes I see families make. If they even did get their documents in order, their living will and their power of attorney, they don't review it until now they're in crisis. And if you lost capacity because of a stroke, but you still have your ex-spouse named as your power of attorney because you never updated it, that could be a problem, right?
Yeah, it can be a problem. I mean, courts do, if it's brought to court, will likely invalidate the power of attorney if it's given to an ex-spouse. The presumption of the court is that you don't want, a former spouse to continue to be involved in your life, but it's a process. But the bigger thing is, and this is the issue I have all the time, particularly when husbands or wives, usually it's the women who come to us to help
Yep.
with their husbands. That's typically what happens.
Yep.
And they assume, oh, we share money. We've shared everything our whole lives, particularly in traditional marriages where, everything was together and and so forth, and they just assume, of course, in sickness and in health, so of course I have the authority, just as he would have the authority. It just so happens to be that he's sick, and I have to take care of him. And of course the court's just going to say, yeah, sir, sure, do whatever you want. It's not true. You're not the same person.
Yep.
And the court does not assume that, I've seen many marriages that are not perfect, whether they're first marriages or third marriages, they're not perfect. And courts do not assume, oh, just because you're married, therefore, that's what this person would have wanted. Maybe they didn't. So therefore, the court's going to err. Now, it is true that if you are a spouse, you're going to have first dibs in trying to convince the court to allow you to become the guardian. But then the court's going to say, wait, is this person capable of doing it? Does
Yeah.
this person have their own ailments? All these things come into question, and there might be testimony from children, and geriatric care managers and court evaluators and all these different people who are all part of now your life.
Yep.
And this can all be avoided at a fraction of the cost,
Yep.
small fraction of the cost, but you really have to have the insight to do that, to know, wait a second, I'm getting older. Let me just make sure my ducks are in a row, even if I don't need care tomorrow, and hopefully you don't.
Well, and I think one issue I see families is, well, what age should I be getting my documents in order? And I always say like last year, because you never know, like how many people, like all the people who had major strokes last week didn't wake up thinking, oh, I think I'm going to have a major stroke, but yet thousands and thousands of people did. Or the people just simply trying to get home from work who got T-boned in the intersection, and now they found that now they're incapacitated because they have a head injury or something like that. So the point I'm trying to make is you need to get your documents in order now, because life has its own agenda. And the last thing you want to do is be left vulnerable with someone else making care decisions for you, the cost of it, but also having the quality of life that maybe you didn't want to have. Like, for example, with me, I have a page of addendums on my instructions on my living will and my power of attorney in case I ever lose capacity. so that my decision maker, and we talk about this at least 1 to 2 times a year so that it becomes muscle memory, so that God forbid something happens to me. They're like, Annalee wants this, this, and this, and she does not want this, this, and this. She doesn't want a feeding tube. She doesn't want it intubated. She doesn't want any of that. It's in your best interest to get comfortable having these conversations. And if you're not able to, that's okay, because nobody wants to talk about it. That's why so many people get left exposed legally and their families fall apart because nobody wants to talk about it. Well, you've got your firm, and then that's obviously what I do for a living as well, is facilitate these family meetings to talk about the what whens of aging and the what whens of when dementia progresses and the end of life category of information that families need to know and guide you through that whole process. So that's I just wanted to kind of bring that home, that there's no magic age or no magic number of when you're supposed to get your documents in order. I mean, listen, a few years ago in Milwaukee, a college kid, a roommate walked in and found his college roommate dead from diabetes. So everyone over the age of 18, correct, should have their estate documents in order. And the more we can talk about it and normalize aging and life, the better it's going to be. I wanted to just share how we got introduced a year ago or so, because some people listening to this might think, well, I already have my documents in order, but do you really? It's worth having a second opinion, if you will. To look at documents, because the documents that you reviewed for one of my clients, there were a lot of significant gaps in the power of attorney forms that weren't filled out. They're marked optional, but they really shouldn't have been marked optional. You know, having those documents in order springs into like Medicaid planning as well. So you only have like one shot to get the documents right when you're looking at Medicaid and estate planning as well, or Medicaid planning. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and how you basically saved this client, this mutual client that I brought to you, a lot of angst and heartache, because now she knows that her paperwork is done properly so that she can get the services that she needs for senior care?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you then. It's a pleasure to continue to speak with you. First of all, and that so this goes kind of back to the last thing you said about when to get your documents in order. It's kind of like a house. You buy a house, you have
Yeah,
a starter house, and then you get a bigger house. And then someday you might downsize. So what's appropriate for you in each point in your life is very different. And that's the way we view planning. What might be appropriate for you in terms of estate planning many years ago may not be the proper route when your spouse has dementia. And then the question is, well, can your spouse still execute documents? Can they still sign a power of attorney? So we sat down with the spouse and we figured that they could. At the time, they probably could not now. And then we started to do planning, basically undid the entire plan that existed, that was put into place. Now, it happened in that particular instance, I don't think it was that great to begin with.
right.
But even if it had been, that was not anticipating elder care planning. Now we had to transfer assets. We had to do additional trust planning. We had to apply for community Medicaid. And now a person is now going to have, likely live-in care,
Yep.
where, they're going to have round-the-clock care and they're not going to pay for it. And in today's market, that's $15,000, $20,000 a month. So if you do this right, and most people come to me and they say, wait a second, I'm not poor. Now, poor is a subjective term.
Yeah.
To Elon Musk, we're all poor.
Yeah.
Very poor.
Right.
It's very subjective. But the people who come to us to do planning are not single mothers who live in a shelter.
Right.
Those people can't, frankly, afford an attorney. We do some pro bono work, but that's not the typical client. The typical client is someone who's getting older. They have a house, they have some funds, they might have investments, they might have a retirement account. And that's simply not going to cut it if both they and their spouse might need $20,000 a month of care.
Right.
So we figure out a plan so that we can minimize the exposure and get them the care that they need without having to spend it. And it's a common misconception that the care that you're going to get that's paid for by Medicaid, I'll differ state by state, is going to be inferior than what you're going to get privately. It's not necessarily the case. Most institutional settings take Medicaid, and many, especially in New York, many home care agencies also contract with managed long-term care plans and take Medicaid. And they're the exact same home care agencies that you'd pay privately $40 to $45 an hour for. So it is true that if Medicaid, if you medically only need 8 hours a day, but you want 12 hours a day, that Medicaid's not just going to, satisfy your fancy, so to speak,
Right.
and give you what you want. You could fight for it if you medically have a reason to get it, and we could do that for you. But that's where having a private agency is. Obviously, some agencies that don't contract with Medicaid, but for a large percentage of cases, you're going to get pretty much the same level of care. You might just not get as much of it if you're not really medically entitled to it.
Sure. Right. And this, these topics I think hit home for a lot of people, especially if they're in that caregiving journey or dementia journey. And hopefully this podcast or this conversation triggers you to say, we really do need to look and maybe refresh our documents because maybe it's been a while or the variables have changed. Now you have dementia or now you have cancer or you're moving and you're needing more care or life changes. And so one takeaway is look at your documents, get a second opinion, look to see, do you have the coverage that you thought you do? Because there's a lot of vulnerability and exposure in that client that I brought to you. There was a lot of vulnerability there. So maybe states have changed their forms, from when you got your documents done 20 years ago, the forms might be different. So the goal here is just to educate you, bring you resources that you can leverage in your area. But how, Ariel, if people wanted to learn more about the coverage of services that you offer, in your locations in New York and New Jersey, how would they be able to reach you? What's
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
website?
Thank you, Annalee. So our website address is www.ejrosenlaw.com. That's www.ejrosenlaw.com. You can also call our office at 914-816-2900, 914-816-2900. And we'd be honored to speak with any of you if we
And
give you the
I
option.
know you were so patient and so great with with my clients because the other thing is when you go to an attorney, it can be very intimidating, right? It can be very intimidating, and it's not usually because things are going well that someone seeks an attorney. It's usually something terrible has happened, dementia progression, someone died, someone had a stroke, a divorce. So it's already, an emotionally kind of charged type of situation that prompts people to go to an attorney. So it's best to do this stuff proactively where you can think clearly, have the mental clarity and the mental bandwidth to really be thoughtful with your legal planning instead of having to make kind of really quick crisis knee-jerk reaction decisions and then just hope and pray that you made the right decision in the state of a crisis. In my line of work, which is unfortunately it's all crisis planning or crisis management because families just don't always think about the what whens of aging, and so it's always like crisis mode. I've never had a family in over 30 years ever say, gosh, Annalee, I feel really confident about decisions that we had to make on behalf of our loved one when you're in a state of crisis and exhaustion and overwhelm. So the takeaway, plan ahead, look at your documents, get a second opinion. If you're in the New York, New Jersey, and then you said you have a colleague in Connecticut as well, or
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
They're all based in New York, but
Yeah, yeah.
they
Kind of
license
branch
there.
out. Yeah, so if you're in that neck of the woods, so to speak, reach out and do offer a consult.
So usually what we do is we have an initial call where we get the basic lay of the land. I guess
Okay.
that's what you would call an initial consult, and then we have a more robust 1 to 2 hour meeting that is paid for, but
Yes.
it's a review of all your documentation and a full throttled meeting, and we could develop a plan. So I guess there's the initial consultation, and then there's a more formal consultation. And one thing that I wanted to add to what you said, Annalee, we want people to come to us early. But as we say, there's never too early and there's never too late. Don't assume that whether it's for Medicaid and you have a loved one in a nursing home and they didn't protect their assets 5 years in advance, that there's nothing to do. There are still things that can be done even in a crisis situation. Don't just listen to what the nursing home tells
Right.
you, that they tell you to spend down your resources. There are options. Get your own advisory council, get your own elder care attorney to make sure that no matter what state you live in, to make sure that your or your loved ones' rights and best interests are protected.
Correct. Yeah. And that 2 hour deep dive assessment that you did with my client, it was so, so incredibly informative. And the way that you talked with her and her person were just so compassionate and so tender. And so just thank you for having that kind of human side of your personality and of your firm as well, because these people are scared and they're overwhelmed and they're dealing with stuff that they wish that they weren't dealing with, and now to have to look at their legal stuff is really intimidating. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And we try to do that but whether it's me or other people in
Yeah,
our office,
for
we
sure.
do that for everybody. We try to handhold them through a process. It's not easy. When our firm was smaller, we subleased from a real estate firm. And, I remember seeing the people who would come to the closings for them.
Yeah,
And there was a lot of excitement. People were laughing. It depends on what they're coming to us for. But
sure.
usually when they're coming to us, they're not laughing.
Right.
We're dealing with reality. And you have to walk them through it. It's not just a transaction. This is their whole life that you're dealing with. There's family dynamics, there's financial dynamics, there's second marriages, there's
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff that you're dealing with. And no one's coming out and saying, I wish I could do this, but they're not saying, wow, he cured my loved one's dementia. He
Right.
didn't do that. I wish I could do that. But what we make it is our goal is to make it easier and less cost prohibitive, so that you could do it in a way that you feel okay with, and that you protect yourself as best you can and your loved ones.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really what it boils down to is protecting yourself, your loved ones, and making smart decisions now versus waiting until crisis mode when you're scared and overwhelmed. So, Ariel, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, your care and compassion, and I really appreciate your time being the guest today.
And thank you, Annalee, for having me and for everything you do.
You're very welcome. You take care.
All the best.